The stars shimmered like silver dust scattered across the endless darkness of space. The human exploration ship Aurora glided quietly through that silence, its engines humming softly, almost like a heartbeat in the void. Inside the ship, life was calm. The crew had settled into their daily routines, some monitoring systems, others sitting in the small mess hall, sharing soft laughter over lukewarm coffee. It had been weeks since they left Earth's last colony station, and everyone was looking forward to returning home once their delivery mission was done. The Aurora was not a warship. It was built for transport and research, sleek, efficient, but not heavily armed. Its mission was simple: carry supplies and communication modules to a remote human settlement near the edge of the known galaxy. For the crew, it was supposed to be just another long but peaceful journey. The captain of the ship was a man who had spent half his life among the stars. Calm, experienced, and deeply respected, he had seen his share of dangerous travels. But even he admitted this route felt strangely quiet. There was a certain stillness outside the ship's windows that didn't feel normal. Space was always silent, but this silence carried weight, like a breath held too long. He often found himself standing near the main observation deck, looking out at the stars. They twinkled beautifully, but tonight they seemed watchful. He couldn't explain why, but something deep inside told him that not everything was as peaceful as it looked. Still, he didn't say much about it to the crew. The last thing he wanted was to spread unease. Down in the control room, a few young officers monitored the radar screen. It occasionally flickered with small blips, random static or signals bouncing off distant asteroids. The youngest officer frowned at the display, tapping a few buttons. "Sir," he called softly, "I'm picking up strange readings again." The communication officer leaned over. "Probably just distortion from the asteroid belt. Happens all the time out here." The young man nodded, but his eyes stayed on the screen. The signals didn't vanish. They came and went like echoes of something trying to hide. But he didn't press further. It wasn't his place to question every flicker. The crew trusted their systems, and the systems had never failed them before. Hours passed. The hum of the engines filled the hallways, steady and familiar. Crew members moved through the ship with easy steps, chatting, adjusting systems, and occasionally gazing out the small windows to catch glimpses of distant galaxies. Some sat quietly, writing messages to family back home. There was comfort in the routine. Out here, far from Earth, you learn to find peace in repetition. But that night, a strange tension seemed to float through the air. Nothing had happened, yet everyone felt it. It was the kind of feeling that made your heart beat a little faster for no clear reason. Even the usual background sounds, the clicks of the panels, the distant vibration of the engine, seemed sharper somehow. Later in the main lounge, a few crew members played cards. Their laughter echoed softly, but even that couldn't mask the unease one of them finally voiced. "Does anyone else feel like we're being watched?" he asked, half joking, half serious. The others chuckled, but one of them replied, "Watched? By what? There's nothing out here but stars." "Yeah," the first one muttered, looking out the window. "That's what makes it worse." The captain happened to walk by, catching the tail end of the conversation. He smiled lightly and said, "Space can play tricks on the mind. Don't let your imagination run wild. Get some rest when your shift ends." His words were calm, but deep down he knew they weren't entirely wrong. He returned to the bridge, where the main control screens glowed faint blue. The navigation officer greeted him quietly. "Course steady, Captain. All systems normal," he nodded. "Good. Keep scanning the perimeter. I want constant checks every 15 minutes. "Yes, sir." He stood by the central console, hands clasped behind his back, his eyes fixed on the holographic projection of nearby space. Everything appeared clear, but his instincts whispered otherwise. Years in the void had taught him that silence could be the loudest warning. Meanwhile, in the lower decks, 2 engineers were running diagnostics on the power conduits. The younger of the 2 was humming a tune while tightening a bolt. "You know," he said casually, "once we finish this trip, I'm taking a long break. Maybe somewhere with real air, real sunlight." The older engineer smiled. "You and half the crew, kid. But yeah, I can't wait to smell grass again." They laughed softly, the kind of tired laughter that comes from long days and quiet spaces. For a moment, everything felt normal. But then the lights flickered. Just once, they both froze. "Did you see that?" "Yeah," the older one said, frowning. He checked the systems. No faults recorded. Maybe a power fluctuation, But there were no solar storms nearby, no logical reason for the sudden blink. The older man noted it down anyway. Routine, he told himself. Always note the small things. Up above, in the bridge, the captain received the report. It was minor, but it added to the growing sense of unease. He ordered another systems scan just in case. The scan came back clean. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. Hours later, the crew began to wind down. The ship's lighting dimmed to night mode, a soft glow replacing the bright white lights. People drifted to their bunks, tired but at peace. The captain sat alone in his chair, the stars still staring back at him through the observation window. He thought about his years in space, the close calls, the wonders, the loneliness. Out here, a single mistake could end everything. But he had faith in his crew. They were good people, strong and steady. He took a deep breath and let his gaze wander to a distant cluster of stars. They looked beautiful, glittering like a promise. He didn't notice that among them a faint shape moved, too smooth to be natural, too quiet to be random. Far out beyond their sensors, something lurked in the darkness. A fleet of alien vessels had been shadowing the Aurora for days. They knew the human ship was unarmed, a transport vessel with minimal defenses, perfect prey. The raiders had destroyed dozens of ships before, leaving no survivors. They believed this one would be no different. They waited for the right moment to strike, watching, tracking, analyzing every move. Inside the Aurora, life continued as if nothing was wrong. The crew's laughter, the soft hum of machines, the calm rhythm of duty, all of it unaware that death was gliding silently closer. The first sign came subtly. The navigation officer noticed a sudden drop in the signal strength of their long-range communication beacon. He adjusted the settings, but it didn't return to normal. He frowned and reported it. The captain ordered a diagnostic, but again nothing seemed wrong. Minutes later, a low beeping began from one of the side consoles. The radar officer's eyes widened. "Sir, there's something out there." The captain turned sharply. "How far?" "About 30,000 kilometers. Maybe more. The reading's faint, like they're using a cloaking field." "Can you identify?" "Not yet, sir. Could be debris." Or, before he could finish, the signal vanished, just gone. The radar showed empty space again. The captain leaned forward. "Keep scanning." Continuous feed. "If there's something out there, I want to know." The officer nodded, his hand shaking slightly as he adjusted the controls. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of machinery. Seconds stretched into minutes. The tension was heavy now, pressing down on every breath. Then, just as suddenly, the signal appeared again. "Closer this time. Contact," the officer shouted. Multiple signals, closing fast. Alarms blared through the ship. Red lights flashed, and the crew jolted awake in their bunks. The captain grabbed the intercom. "All hands to stations. This is not a drill." People scrambled through corridors, pulling on their uniforms, strapping into their posts. Fear spread quickly, but so did determination. They trusted their captain. He stared at the radar. Dozens of ships surrounding them, forming a tightening ring. Whoever they were, they had planned this perfectly. He could almost hear the enemy's confidence in the way they approached. Slow, deliberate, sure that the humans would surrender. For a brief moment, the Aurora was still. The crew waited for the captain's command. He looked around the bridge at the faces of his people, tired, frightened, but loyal. He knew surrender would mean death anyway. He took a deep breath and spoke firmly. "We don't know who they are or what they want, but we are not giving up this ship. We hold our ground. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Lock every hatch and power up the defense grid." The officer hesitated. "Sir, we're outnumbered." "I know," the captain replied. "But if they think we'll kneel, they've chosen the wrong humans." Outside, the void of space seemed to tighten, as if holding its breath for what was about to come. The alien ships moved closer, their weapons glowing faintly. Inside the Aurora, the humans braced themselves, hearts pounding, knowing that the calm of space had ended. And just like that, the trap was about to spring. The red lights flashed across every wall of the Aurora, filling the narrow hallways with a sense of urgency. The calm silence that had ruled the ship only moments ago was gone. Now alarms screamed and the sound of boots echoed against the metal floors as the crew rushed to their stations. Fear spread through the ship like cold air, but no one let it control them. They had trained for emergencies before, though none had ever been this real. On the main bridge, the captain stood tall despite the tension. His hands rested firmly on the console as his eyes scanned the radar. The unidentified ships had surrounded them completely. There was no clear path for escape. The enemy hadn't fired yet, but their intentions were obvious. They were closing in slowly, like predators circling their prey. The communication officer turned to the captain. "Sir, they're sending a transmission. Put it through," the captain ordered. The screen flickered and a distorted voice filled the room. It wasn't human. The tone was deep and sharp, filled with arrogance. The message was short: surrender your vessel. Power down your engines. Resist and you will be destroyed. The crew froze. Some looked toward the captain, waiting for his response. For a few seconds, the room was completely silent except for the soft beeping of the radar. The captain's eyes hardened. He took a deep breath and spoke in a calm voice. "They expect us to give up." The first officer swallowed nervously. "Sir, our weapons, they're not strong enough to face that many ships." "I know," the captain said quietly, "but surrendering isn't an option." Down in the engineering bay, the power systems flickered again as the crew prepared for battle mode. The young technician from before tightened his gloves and looked at the glowing energy cores. "This ship wasn't built for fighting," he muttered to himself, "but we'll make it work." His partner gave him a determined nod. "If the captain's not giving up, neither are we." On the bridge, the alien voice came again, this time sharper. "Final warning. Surrender now or you will be destroyed." The captain stepped closer to the screen. His voice was steady when he replied, "This is a human vessel. We do not surrender." The transmission ended instantly. For a few seconds, everything went quiet again. Then, without any warning, a blinding flash lit up the stars outside. The first enemy blast hit the Aurora's shield with tremendous force, shaking the entire ship. Sparks burst from the ceiling and the floor trembled. A few crew members fell, gripping the edges of their consoles to keep from sliding. "Shields at 70%, shouted the defense officer. The captain steadied himself. "Return fire. Target the nearest ship." The first torpedo launched with a roar, disappearing into the darkness of space. It struck one of the alien vessels dead on, exploding into a burst of light. The crew gasped as the enemy ship spun out of formation, flames trailing behind it. For a brief moment, hope flickered among them, but the hope didn't last long. The alien fleet responded with a storm of energy blasts, dozens of them crashing into the Aurora's shield. The ship rocked violently, lights dimming, panels sparking. The noise was deafening. Alarms screamed from every direction, shields dropping 50%. "Engineering, reroute all auxiliary power to defense." "Aye, sir." The young technician in the lower deck ran from one console to another, sweat dripping down his face. Come on, he muttered, fingers flying over the controls. He could feel the vibration of the impacts through the floor. One wrong wire and the whole power grid could collapse. Up on the bridge, the captain gave quick, sharp commands. Every crew member moved with focus. There was no time for panic now. Their survival depended on discipline. The navigator adjusted the ship's course, dodging incoming fire with tight maneuvers that pushed the ship to its limits. Outside, the stars became a blur of light and color as the Aurora twisted through the void, trying to escape the ring of attackers. Two alien ships fired in unison, and the blast struck the rear of the human ship, sending it spinning. "Stabilize the ship," the captain barked. "Trying, sir. Engines are overheating." The ship trembled again, then slowly leveled out. Smoke filled parts of the bridge, and the smell of burnt metal spread through the air. The captain coughed, waving it away. "Status? Shields at 30%. Hull integrity critical on the lower deck." The captain clenched his jaw. "Seal off damaged sections. Focus all power to the main thrusters." Another explosion rocked the left side of the ship. The crew in the corridor scrambled as debris fell from above. One officer fell to his knees, clutching his injured arm, but he waved off help. "Keep going," he shouted to his teammate. "We can't stop now." Even through fear, courage grew stronger. The humans knew they were outmatched, but every second they stayed alive was a victory. Then came a moment that changed everything. On the radar, one of the alien ships moved in too close, maybe overconfident, maybe careless. The captain saw his chance. "Target that one," he ordered. "Give it everything we've got." The weapons officer nodded and locked on. The Aurora fired a full barrage, 3 plasma torpedoes followed by rapid pulse blasts. The shots hit the alien ship directly at its center. The explosion was massive, lighting up the dark space with orange flames. The crew erupted in cheers for the first time since the attack began. But the celebration was brief. The alien fleet responded with renewed fury. They had underestimated the humans once, but not again. The sky outside turned into chaos as beams of energy crisscrossed in every direction. The Aurora weaved and twisted, dodging as many as it could, but not all. Direct hit on Section 4. "Fire in Cargo Bay 2!" The captain's voice cut through the noise. "Contain it. Use emergency systems. We can't lose oxygen there." The engineer's voice crackled through the comms. "We're trying, sir." "Power's unstable!" He grabbed a tool and dove into a maze of wires and glowing circuits. Every shock that hit the ship made his hands tremble, but he didn't stop. "If I can get the reactor to reroute, we might just hold out a little longer," he muttered. Sparks flew, lighting his face as sweat dripped into his eyes. Back on the bridge, another hit threw the crew off balance. The captain's chair jolted violently and he was thrown against the console. A small cut opened on his forehead, but he ignored it, pulling himself upright. "Report. We've lost 2 defense turrets. Keep firing with what's left. The humans were not giving up." Even with smoke filling the air and alarms screaming, they fought with everything they had. One officer's hands shook as he controlled the targeting system, his eyes burning from exhaustion. "Come on," he whispered. "Just one more hit." He fired. The torpedo flew straight and fast, hitting another alien ship in the flank. A burst of light filled the screen. The explosion sent the enemy vessel spinning, breaking its formation again. The captain gave a small nod. "Good shot." The crew didn't cheer this time. They were too tired, too focused. The air was hot, the lights flickering. But under that pressure, they moved like one unit, perfectly in sync. Suddenly, the enemy's attack slowed. The radar officer looked up in surprise. "They're regrouping, sir." "Regrouping?" "Yes, sir. Looks like they're trying to encircle us again." The captain thought for a moment. His voice dropped low. "They think we're weaker now. Let's use that against them." He ordered the ship to drift slightly, pretending to be more damaged than it was. Power output was reduced just enough to make the ship appear critical on the enemy's scanners. The alien vessels began to move closer, preparing for what they believed would be an easy capture. "Hold fire," the captain whispered. "Wait for my signal." The alien ships closed in. 10,000 kilometers, then 5, then 3. The crew held their breath. The captain's eyes narrowed. Now, the Aurora suddenly roared back to life. All power surged to the weapons. The humans unleashed everything. Torpedoes, pulse cannons, energy bursts, everything the ship had left. The surprise attack caught the enemy completely off guard. 2 of their ships exploded instantly. Another was torn in half by a chain reaction of its own weapons. The bridge filled with bright light as the explosions reflected off the windows. For a moment, the darkness of space turned into a fiery storm. "Targets down," the weapons officer shouted. The crew didn't celebrate this time either. They knew it wasn't over. The captain gripped the railing and looked out into the glowing debris field. "They wanted us to surrender," he said quietly, almost to himself. "But they forgot one thing." "What's that, sir?" the navigator asked. "That humans never surrender." The others nodded silently. Outside, pieces of burning wreckage floated through space like falling stars. The enemy fleet was still large, but their formation was broken. The Aurora had survived the first wave. Inside the ship, people took short breaths, wiping sweat from their faces, patching wounds, resetting systems. They knew another attack would come soon, but for the moment they allowed themselves one small thought. They were still alive. And somewhere in the captain's mind, one thing became clear. This was no longer just about survival. It was about showing the universe what humans were made of. The silence after battle felt heavy, almost sacred. The crew looked at one another through the smoke and dim lights, and even without words they understood. This was only the beginning. Smoke drifted through the corridors of the Aurora. The faint smell of burnt metal lingered in the air, mixing with the sound of crackling sparks from damaged wires. Every few seconds, a quiet alarm beeped somewhere in the background. The ship was still alive, but barely. The battle had ended for now. The alien ships had pulled back, probably to reorganize. The human vessel floated in the middle of a field of wreckage and debris, glowing faintly in the darkness. Pieces of destroyed enemy ships drifted slowly past the windows, shining like dying stars. Inside, the crew worked without rest. They moved through the corridors with tired eyes and quick hands, checking systems, sealing ruptures, and helping the injured. The once bright halls were dim now, lit by emergency lights that gave everything a soft red glow. In the med bay, several crew members lay on narrow beds. Some were unconscious. Others whispered softly to the medic as she worked to treat their burns and cuts. Despite the exhaustion, she kept going, her hands steady. Every life on board mattered. The captain entered the room quietly. His uniform was torn at the shoulder and a faint line of blood marked his forehead, but he didn't care. He only wanted to see his people. He moved slowly from bed to bed, speaking softly to those who were awake. "You did well," he told them. "Rest now. We'll need your strength again soon." One of the wounded crew members looked up at him and smiled weakly. "Sir, did we really hit them that hard?" The captain nodded. "You did. You helped save this ship." The crew member chuckled faintly before drifting into sleep. The captain stayed a few moments longer, then turned and walked back to the bridge. When he entered, the mood was tense but focused. Screens flickered with static as the surviving officers worked on repairs. The radar was active again, showing a wide range around the ship. For now, no enemies were in sight, but everyone knew they could return at any time. "Report," the captain said quietly. The first officer replied, "Main shields are down to 20%. Weapons systems are running at half power. Engines, still functional, but if we push them too hard, they could fail." The captain's eyes moved across the glowing screens. "And the crew?" "5 seriously injured, dozens with minor wounds. No casualties so far." The captain gave a short nod. "That's something to be thankful for." He looked out through the main window. The stars stretched endlessly before him, beautiful and silent. Yet that silence didn't bring peace anymore. It felt like waiting for the storm to return. After a long pause, he spoke again. "We'll make temporary repairs. Get the shields up as much as you can. They'll be back soon." The crew exchanged tired looks but obeyed without question. They trusted him completely now. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Down in engineering, the young technician wiped the sweat from his forehead. The room was hot and filled with the steady hum of machinery. He had been working non-stop for hours, his hands covered in grease and small burns. The power core pulsed unevenly, flickering like a heartbeat under strain. "Reactor stabilizing," his partner called out. "We've got 30% more power rerouted to shields." "That's good," the technician said, tightening a bolt. "But if we push it any harder, the cooling system will blow." His partner gave a tired laugh. "Then we'll just pray it doesn't." They shared a brief grin before going back to work. Even in moments of chaos, a little humor helped them keep going. On the bridge, the captain sat quietly in his chair, watching the dark space ahead. His mind replayed the battle again and again. The first hit, the shaking ship, the screams over the intercom. He had seen danger before, but never like this. These attackers weren't pirates or rebels. They were something far more organized, far more deadly. He leaned forward and spoke to the communication officer. "Send out a distress signal. Long-range frequency. Keep transmitting until we get an answer." "Yes, sir." The signal was sent into the void, a silent cry for help traveling across light years. No one knew if anyone would hear it in time. A few hours passed. The crew worked tirelessly. The worst of the fires had been put out, and damaged systems were beginning to come back online. But just as hope began to rise again, the radar screen beeped. Once, twice, then continuously. The officer's voice broke the silence. "Captain, I'm detecting movement." The captain turned sharply. "How many?" The officer swallowed. "At least 10 ships. They're returning." A heavy silence fell across the bridge. Every person in the room froze for a second, feeling their stomachs twist. The same enemy fleet, they hadn't retreated. They had simply gone to regroup, and now they were coming back stronger than before. The captain stood slowly. "All stations prepare for battle. Power up the weapons." "Sir, the shields are still weak," the first officer reminded him. "I know," the captain replied, "but we'll make them work." The ship came alive again. The soft hum of the engines grew louder, and the flickering lights steadied as power was rerouted to critical systems. Crew members rushed through corridors, locking down hatches, securing loose equipment, and taking their positions. The tension was suffocating. Everyone knew the odds, but no one said a word about giving up. Outside, the alien ships approached in perfect formation. They looked like shadows against the starlight, moving with mechanical precision. Their weapons began to glow with a pale blue energy. The first blast came fast. It hit the Aurora's weakened shields, shaking the entire vessel. The crew braced themselves as sparks flew from the consoles. "Shields holding, barely," shouted the defense officer. "Return fire," the captain ordered. The ship's cannons roared, sending streaks of light through the darkness. The torpedoes hit 2 of the enemy ships but only damaged them slightly. The aliens had adapted. Their formations were tighter, their defenses stronger. The second wave of attacks came harder. The ship trembled violently. Panels ripped open, smoke poured from the ceiling, and lights flickered once again. "Engineering report." The young technician's voice crackled over the radio. "We've lost one of the power conduits. Rerouting now, but we're running out of time." "Do whatever it takes," the captain replied. "Just keep us alive." The technician pushed himself harder, ignoring the pain in his arms. He knew every second counted. He could feel the vibration of explosions through the floor, but he didn't stop. "Come on, girl," he whispered to the ship. "Don't die on me now." Up on the bridge, another explosion rocked the right side. The navigator was thrown from his seat, but he quickly got back up, blood dripping from a small cut near his eye. "Engine still responding, sir." The captain gave a firm nod. "Good, bring us around. Aim for their leader." The Aurora spun sharply, dodging incoming blasts and positioning itself behind a large asteroid. The captain used the rock's shadow as cover, his eyes sharp and focused. "They think we're running. Let them come closer." The alien ships followed, scanning for movement. Their sensors picked up the faint heat of the Aurora's engines, and they began to close in. "Hold your fire," the captain whispered. The enemy fleet passed the asteroid, unaware of the trap. Now, the Aurora unleashed everything it had left. Torpedoes, pulse cannons, even the emergency flares were fired together, creating chaos in the enemy formation. 2 alien ships were hit directly and exploded into bright flashes. Another crashed into debris, tearing itself apart. Cheers broke out on the bridge, but the captain raised his hand. "Don't celebrate yet, focus!" The remaining ships fired back, hitting the Aurora squarely in the midsection. The bridge shook violently and several systems went offline. "Shields gone," shouted the officer. The captain didn't hesitate. "Then we'll fight without them." The air filled with smoke and sparks. The humans fired again and again, their aim steady despite the chaos. Every time an explosion lit up outside, the crew's spirits lifted a little more. They were tired, wounded, and nearly out of power, but they refused to stop. Down below, the technician finally managed to stabilize the reactor. The ship's lights flickered back to full power. He smiled through the exhaustion and radioed the bridge. "Captain, we've got power back." The captain allowed himself a brief smile. "Good work. Let's finish this." The Aurora accelerated, weaving through the enemy formation like a storm. The alien ships tried to trap it again, but this time the humans were faster. Every move was precise, every shot calculated. One by one, the enemy ships began to fall. After what felt like hours, the final alien vessel exploded into a cloud of debris. The sudden quiet that followed felt unreal. No alarms, no gunfire. Just silence. The captain stood still for a moment, staring at the radar. It was clear. No enemies left. The crew exchanged stunned looks, hardly able to believe it. Then someone whispered, "We did it." And just like that, the bridge filled with soft laughter and tired smiles. Some people cried quietly. Others leaned against the walls, too exhausted to speak. They had survived, again. The captain finally sat down, his voice calm but proud. "Good work, everyone. You've all done something extraordinary today." Outside, the wreckage of the alien fleet drifted silently, reflecting the light of distant stars. The Aurora, damaged but unbroken, continued to glide through space. They had fought the impossible and lived. But deep down, everyone knew this wasn't over. Somewhere out there, others would hear about what happened, and they wouldn't stay silent for long. For now, though, the humans allowed themselves to breathe. They looked out at the vast galaxy, their hearts heavy but hopeful. The stars had seen their struggle. The Aurora drifted quietly through the void after the brutal wave of attacks. The lights flickered inside the ship, sparks occasionally bursting from broken panels. The crew worked in silence, their faces pale, their bodies covered in sweat and dust. Every person on board knew they were lucky to still be alive. The ship was damaged beyond what anyone had imagined, and they had used nearly all their resources just to keep the engines running. But the captain wasn't ready to give up. His determination was like fire, quiet but powerful enough to keep everyone moving. For hours, they floated near the edge of an asteroid field. The crew used that cover to hide from enemy radar while they repaired what they could. The captain studied the map again and again, tracing his fingers over the stars, searching for a way to outsmart the aliens hunting them. He didn't talk much, but when he did, everyone listened. His calm voice gave them strength. He reminded them why they were fighting, not for victory, but for survival. The communication officer tried to send a distress signal back to human space, but the antenna was damaged. The engineer, exhausted and bleeding from a cut on his forehead, worked tirelessly to fix it. The entire crew helped, no matter their rank. The cook, the navigator, even the medic, all took turns carrying heavy cables and welding plates over open sparks. There was no hierarchy now. They were one family, tied together by fear and courage. Outside, the stars shimmered coldly, and the silence of space was almost deafening. The crew could hear the faint hum of machinery, the groaning metal of the ship as it struggled to stay alive. They knew the aliens would return. They always did. Those raiders never left survivors. But the captain had a plan, one that even his closest officers didn't fully understand yet. He had studied the enemy's movement during the last attack and realized something. Their formation wasn't perfect. There was a weakness hidden beneath all their confidence. He called his officers to the control room. The screen glowed faintly, showing a cluster of red dots, enemy ships moving in patterns nearby. He pointed at the display and said quietly, "They'll come again, but this time we'll decide where." The others exchanged glances, unsure what he meant. He explained that they could use the asteroid field as a trap. If they pretended to be drifting and helpless, the aliens would move closer, thinking the Aurora was ready to surrender. Then they could use the asteroids to their advantage, turning nature itself into a weapon. The crew hesitated. It was dangerous, maybe even suicidal, but there was no other choice. Slowly, the captain's confidence spread like fire through the room. They started preparing for what could be their final stand. The engineer redirected power from non-essential systems to weapons and shields. The medic set up emergency stations, knowing the next battle would be far worse. The gunners checked and rechecked their targeting systems. Time passed slowly. Every second felt like an hour. Outside, the asteroids drifted in silence, enormous rocks spinning lazily in the void. Then, just as predicted, the radar began to beep. The aliens were returning. Their ships appeared on the edge of the scanner, sleek, sharp, and cold like predators sensing blood. The crew stayed quiet. The Aurora powered down its lights to appear lifeless. From a distance, it looked like a wreck. Just another defeated ship lost to space. The alien commander gave an order, and 3 of their ships moved closer. The rest stayed back, ready to attack if needed. The aliens wanted to board the Aurora, take its crew as prisoners, and claim its resources. They expected no fight, no resistance. But they had made one mistake. They underestimated the humans once again. Inside the Aurora, the crew waited in darkness. Their hearts pounded in their chests as they watched the alien ships approach. The captain's voice came softly through the intercom. "Hold your positions. Wait for my signal." His tone was calm, but everyone could feel the tension. The engineer whispered to himself, praying the power relays would hold. The navigator stared at the display, counting the distance between the enemy and the nearest asteroid. The alien ships came closer, beams of light sweeping across the Aurora's hull. One of them fired a small plasma bolt, just to test if the ship was still functional. The bolt hit the side and bounced off harmlessly. They took it as confirmation that the humans were finished. That was the moment the captain was waiting for. He gave a short command. "Now." The Aurora came to life instantly. Lights blazed, engines roared, and hidden cannons unfolded from the ship's underbelly. A massive surge of plasma fire erupted toward the closest alien ship, hitting it square in the engine core. The explosion was blinding. Fragments of the ship scattered into the asteroids. Before the other 2 could react, the Aurora's secondary guns fired again, striking the second one and sending it spinning into a rock the size of a mountain. The impact shattered both. The remaining alien ship tried to retreat, but the Aurora chased it, firing non-stop. The crew worked together like a single heartbeat, calling out damage reports, adjusting shields, and focusing fire with precision. The aliens hadn't expected this kind of counterattack, especially from a ship that looked half dead. Their commander quickly ordered reinforcements to move in, but by the time they arrived, the battlefield had turned against them. The Aurora used the asteroids to block enemy fire. Each time the aliens tried to circle around, The humans used the rocks to disappear from radar, appearing again just long enough to strike. It was like a deadly dance between life and death. The captain guided his team with short, clear orders, never raising his voice even as explosions shook the bridge. The alien commander, watching from afar, was furious. He couldn't understand how such a small, damaged vessel could fight with this much precision. His fleet had destroyed countless human ships before, but none had fought like this one. He ordered all his ships to surround the Aurora completely and crush it in one final attack. The captain saw the incoming ships on the radar, dozens of them forming a ring around their position. His crew looked at him, waiting. They knew they couldn't survive a full-on assault like that. The shields were already weak, and the weapons were running low on power. The captain took a deep breath and said quietly, "Then we use everything we have left." He ordered the engineer to reroute all remaining energy to the main plasma cannon. The lights dimmed across the ship as power drained from every system. Even life support flickered. The air grew colder. In the dark, the crew held their breath. The captain watched the screen, waiting for the aliens to close the circle completely. When they did, he smiled slightly and gave the final command. "Fire!" The cannon burst with a deafening roar. A massive wave of energy shot outward, hitting several alien ships at once. The explosion was so intense that it sent shock waves rippling through the asteroid field. Rocks shattered, fragments flew in every direction, and several alien ships collided trying to escape. The entire space lit up with fire and debris. When the light faded, only a few enemy ships remained, their formations broken. The Aurora floated silently, smoke rising from its engines. The crew looked around in disbelief. They had survived again, but the cost was enormous. Systems were failing, oxygen was dropping, and many compartments were sealed off due to fire. Still, the captain stood firm, gripping the rail beside his chair. His uniform was torn and blood ran down his arm, but his eyes were steady. They had done the impossible. They had turned the trap into a victory, yet there was no time to celebrate. The surviving alien ships regrouped at a distance, scanning the wreckage. They didn't attack again immediately. They were cautious now. They had seen what humans were capable of. The crew worked quickly to stabilize the ship. The engineer restored minimal power to life support. The medic went from person to person, treating burns and injuries. Some cried quietly, not from pain but from relief. The navigator whispered, "They'll come back soon." The captain nodded. "Let them. We'll be ready." Outside, the remains of destroyed ships drifted among the asteroids, glowing softly against the black of space. The Aurora, scarred and battered, floated in their midst like a ghost, a symbol of defiance. The aliens had come expecting surrender, expecting weakness. Instead, they had met something they couldn't destroy, the unbreakable spirit of humans who refused to bow. As the crew repaired what they could, the captain gazed out into the stars. He knew the battle wasn't over. But in that quiet moment, he also knew one thing for certain. No matter how dark the universe became, courage would always light the way. The Aurora drifted in silence after the explosion that had shattered most of the alien fleet. The air inside the ship was heavy with smoke, and the faint flicker of emergency lights gave the corridors a ghostly glow. Every corner carried signs of the brutal battle, burnt metal, shattered panels, and blood-stained uniforms. Yet the people on board were still breathing, still moving. Somehow they were alive. The crew worked in silence, their movements slow and careful. Every person knew how close they had come to death. The captain stood at the center of the control room, his uniform torn and face streaked with ash. His eyes, however, were sharp and steady. He knew the fight wasn't over. The aliens were not gone. A few ships still lingered in the dark, regrouping, ready to strike again. He could feel it, like a storm waiting to return. He looked at the radar screen. The few red dots that remained were moving closer again. The alien commander was determined to finish what he had started. He wanted the Aurora destroyed, no matter the cost. The captain called his officers together. His voice was calm, but each word carried the weight of everything they had endured. "This is it," he said softly. "They're coming back, and this time they won't stop until we're gone." The engineer shook his head, exhausted. "Sir, we have almost no power left. The main engine is damaged, and the shield generators are barely holding. If they hit us again, we won't last long." The captain didn't argue. He simply nodded, thinking deeply. Then he looked at the crew gathered around him. "We've come too far to fall now," he said. "We'll fight with whatever we have left. No retreat. No surrender, not today." The room fell silent. No one spoke, but everyone understood. They had already beaten death once. They were ready to do it again if they had to. Down in engineering, sparks burst from a broken pipe as the engineer worked with trembling hands. He had been awake for nearly 30 hours straight. His face was covered in grime, his eyes red from lack of sleep. Still, he pushed himself harder. He rerouted power from life support reserves to weapons. It was dangerous, reckless even, but it was their only chance. In the medical bay, the doctor worked quietly over the wounded. He wrapped bandages, cleaned burns, and whispered to those who were too weak to move. Every face told a story of courage and pain. Even those who couldn't fight anymore asked to be kept near the bridge, saying they wanted to see the stars one last time. Meanwhile, on the bridge, the crew prepared for what they knew could be their final stand. The navigator entered new coordinates into the system, plotting a risky path that would take them directly through the center of the enemy formation. The captain approved it without hesitation. "If we're going down," he said, "we'll go down fighting." The aliens were now in position. Their ships formed a vast circle around the Aurora, engines burning bright against the darkness of space. They began to close in slowly, tightening the noose. The alien commander sent a final message, a cold metallic voice echoing through the ship's speakers. "Human vessel, you have fought well, but your resistance ends here." The captain listened quietly, then turned off the transmission. "We'll see about that," he murmured. He took a deep breath, his hand tightening on the edge of the console. The bridge was silent except for the hum of the engines and the faint crackle of the comm system. When the aliens fired the first volley, the Aurora shook violently. Sparks flew across the bridge and several monitors went dark. The ship groaned under the pressure, alarms blaring through every hallway. The captain ordered evasive maneuvers. The navigator pulled hard on the controls, steering the ship through a stream of plasma fire. The gunners returned fire, but their shots were limited. Each blast precious, each hit critical. The aliens had numbers. The Aurora had will. The captain's plan was bold and dangerous. He knew their ship couldn't win in a straight fight. So he ordered a dive straight into the middle of the alien formation. The idea was to confuse them, to make their ships fire on each other. It was a gamble, but it might just work. "Full thrust," he commanded. The engine screamed as the Aurora surged forward, flames trailing from its damaged thrusters. The ship raced toward the heart of the enemy fleet, dodging beams of light that tore through the darkness. The crew held their breath as explosions erupted all around them. The shields flickered, then failed completely. From that point on, every hit struck the hull directly. Inside the ship, panels burst, smoke filled the corridors, and the floor shook violently. People fell, got up, and kept working. The engineer shouted over the intercom, "Engines overheating! We can't hold this speed much longer." The captain's response was simple, "Hold it as long as you can." They plunged deeper into the chaos. Alien ships scrambled to adjust, trying to avoid crashing into one another. The Aurora spun sharply, firing in every direction. Each shot hit something, a fuel cell, a wing, a reactor. The explosions spread like wildfire, consuming the enemy from within. The aliens, confused and panicking, began shooting blindly, hitting their own vessels. The captain stood tall despite the smoke and shaking. "Now," he shouted. "Target their command ship." The gunner locked onto the largest alien vessel in sight, their flagship. It was massive, glowing red under the distant starlight. The Aurora's last remaining torpedo was loaded and ready. "Firing!" the gunner yelled, pressing the trigger. The torpedo streaked through space, leaving a trail of light behind it. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Then it hit.
The explosion was unlike anything they had seen before.
A burst of blinding light expanded across the battlefield, engulfing everything nearby. The shockwave sent the Aurora spinning, but the alien fleet didn't recover. Their formation collapsed completely. Ships crashed into one another, caught in the blast, and debris scattered across the void like falling stars. When the light faded, the silence returned. Only a few broken alien ships remained, drifting without control. The rest were gone. The Aurora floated among the wreckage, silent except for the faint hum of its emergency power. The crew sat in disbelief. The battle was over. They had done it. Against all odds, against every logical possibility, they had survived again, and this time they had won. The captain looked around the bridge. His crew was battered, injured, and exhausted, but their eyes shone with something stronger than fear: pride. They had proven something that would never be forgotten. They had shown the universe that humans could fight even when everything was against them. The engineer limped into the bridge, covered in soot. "Engines are barely holding," he said with a weak grin. "But we're still flying." The captain smiled faintly. "That's all we need." He looked out through the cracked window at the debris field glowing softly in the distance. The stars beyond it seemed brighter now, as if the universe itself had taken notice of their defiance. He opened a channel to all decks. His voice came through, calm and steady. "We made it," he said. "Whatever comes next, remember this moment. Remember that courage isn't about being fearless, it's about refusing to give up." No one cheered. There was no energy left for celebration, but the silence that followed was filled with something powerful, a shared understanding that they had become part of something far greater than themselves. The Aurora continued to drift slowly through space. The damage was severe, but the ship still held together. The medic tended to the wounded. The engineer restarted auxiliary power. The navigator plotted a course back toward human space, though it would take days to reach it. As the crew worked quietly, the captain stood by the window watching the stars. His reflection stared back at him, tired but proud. He whispered to himself, "They thought we'd surrender, but we showed them who we are." Outside, the wreckage of the alien fleet floated silently, a reminder of what had happened. And though the Aurora was only one ship, one small vessel among countless others in the galaxy, that day it had stood for all of humanity. It had proven that no matter how powerful the enemy, no matter how dark the odds, the human spirit would always rise again, bruised, bleeding, but unbroken. The vastness of space had never felt so silent. After the chaos of battle, the Aurora now floated quietly among the wreckage of what had once been a massive alien fleet. Pieces of broken ships drifted past, glowing faintly from the fires still burning within them. The human vessel looked like a ghost itself, its hull scarred, engines flickering weakly, and the once bright insignia now covered in burn marks and dust. Yet despite everything, it was still alive, and so were the people inside it. Inside the ship, the air smelled of smoke, oil, and metal. Emergency lights glowed dim red across the corridors. The sound of distant sparks echoed now and then, but otherwise everything was eerily calm. The crew moved slowly, their bodies sore, their faces pale from exhaustion. No one spoke much. After the long battle, even breathing felt like work. The captain stood near the main window on the bridge, looking out into the stars. His eyes were tired but full of quiet pride. Around him, the few surviving crew members worked to bring systems back online. The engineer was still crawling under panels trying to reconnect power circuits. The navigator sat with a bandage around his arm, typing slowly as he plotted a safe course back to human space. The medic, who had barely slept for 2 days, moved between stations checking on the wounded. They had done it. Against all odds, they had survived. But the victory felt heavy. The price had been enormous. Many of their friends were gone, people they had eaten with, laughed with, and trusted. Every surviving member carried that weight in their eyes. The communication system crackled weakly. The engineer tapped a few buttons trying to get a clear signal. After several failed attempts, a faint voice came through. Human. The sound made everyone stop and turn. It was a rescue ship responding to their signal. Help was on the way. Relief spread quietly through the room. No one cheered. They were too drained for that. Instead, there was a deep silence filled with gratitude. The captain gave a small nod and said softly, "Tell them we're alive. Tell them we're coming home." The medic smiled faintly. The navigator leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes for a moment. The engineer sighed and whispered, "Finally." But even as rescue approached, the crew didn't rest. The captain ordered everyone who could move to help repair the main systems. They had to stabilize life support before the other ship arrived. It wasn't about orders anymore, it was about pride. None of them wanted to be remembered as survivors who drifted helplessly. They wanted to return as the crew who fought back, who never surrendered. Hours passed. Piece by piece, they brought the Aurora back to life. The hum of power returned, faint but steady. The lights flickered on across the decks. The engines coughed and sputtered, but they worked. Slowly, the ship began to move again. Through the front window, the stars shifted as the Aurora turned away from the wreckage. Behind them, the ruins of the alien fleet floated silently. What had once been a terrifying force was now nothing more than scattered debris. It was strange to look at it, beautiful and tragic at the same time. Those who had attacked them were gone, and though the crew hated what they had done, they couldn't help but feel a kind of quiet sadness. War, even when won, never left anyone untouched. When the rescue ships finally arrived, they were stunned by what they found. They had been expecting to recover bodies or wreckage, not a living ship still standing. The Aurora looked badly damaged, but it was still running. Its crew was battered but alive. When the rescuers boarded, they were met with disbelief and admiration. They couldn't believe a single vessel had defeated an entire ambush fleet. The captain gave a full report, though his voice was soft and steady. He didn't brag or take credit. He spoke about his crew, their bravery, their quick thinking, their sacrifice. He said the victory didn't belong to him, but to every person who had chosen to stand and fight instead of surrendering. News of the battle spread quickly through human space. Within days, the Aurora became a legend. People across colonies and stations began to talk about the ship that refused to surrender. To them, it wasn't just a story about war, it was a story about human spirit, about standing strong even when the universe seemed against you. The surviving crew members were honored when they finally returned home. They were met with crowds, applause, and tears. Families of those who had been lost came to see them, to thank them. The government awarded them medals and recognition, but the captain didn't attend most of the ceremonies. He preferred quiet. When asked why, he said simply, "No medal can replace the faces we lost out there." For a while, the crew stayed together. The Aurora was repaired and placed in orbit above a memorial site. It became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that courage and unity could overcome even the darkest moments. The captain often visited the ship after it was retired. He would walk through the empty halls, remembering the voices, the laughter, and the courage of those days. He would run his hand over the walls, still marked with scars from the battle. To him, those marks weren't signs of damage, they were proof of survival. Sometimes he would stand at the bridge, looking out into the stars like he once did during the battle. The same stars that had watched them fight now looked calm and endless again. He would whisper quietly, "We made it." One evening, years later, he received a message from one of his former crew members, a simple text that read, "They'll never forget us." He smiled at that. It wasn't about fame or history. It was about knowing that what they had done had meaning, that in the vast cold universe humanity had proven something unshakable. Back in deep space near the site of the battle, explorers would sometimes pass by and find fragments of alien ships still floating there. They called it the Graveyard of Shadows. Some even said that when they passed through, their sensors would pick up a faint signal, a broken transmission repeating the Aurora's final distress call, as if the ship's spirit still watched over that place. But the truth was simpler. The Aurora had become more than metal and machinery. It had become a story told across generations. Parents told their children about the brave crew who fought against impossible odds. Pilots whispered about it before long missions, drawing courage from its legend. The name Aurora came to mean hope, endurance, and the strength to stand tall when everyone expects you to fall. Years later, when humanity built newer ships, stronger and faster, many of them carried small plaques inside their hulls with a single inscription, "In honor of the Aurora and her crew, the ones who showed us what it means to be human." And so, even though time passed and the world moved on, the memory of that ship never faded. It remained part of human history, a story of unity, courage, and faith. Somewhere far away, beyond the reach of any fleet or colony, the stars still burn quietly just as they did on that fateful night. They shine on eternal and indifferent, but to those who know the story, they seem to glow a little warmer, as if remembering. The captain, now much older, sometimes sat beneath those stars back on Earth, watching the night sky from his small home near the sea. The waves moved gently and the sound reminded him of space, the same endless rhythm, the same mystery. He closed his eyes and smiled faintly. He didn't think about the battle anymore. He thought about the people, the laughter on the ship, the small moments before the chaos, the courage that came from ordinary hearts. Those memories were his real treasure. He whispered softly, "We never gave up. And that's what matters." The wind brushed against his face, and for a moment it almost felt like the hum of the Aurora's engines again, echoing faintly through time. The ship, the crew, the struggle, all of it lived on, not just in history but in spirit. Because even in the endless silence of space where stars burn and fade, one truth had been written forever. Humans may be fragile, but their courage can outshine the darkest night.